भाई यूनिट से आए हैं। क्या है फुल फॉर्म की है? अंडर ग्रेजुएट इंजीनियरिंग रिसर्च समथिंग डे, है ना। रिक्सिंग पूरे तैयार हो गया है। स्टाइल स्टाइल स्टाइल। इतने जज वज बैठे गए, इतने खाना पिया, इतने भी जुगाड़ कर दिया बैग रखने का अपना। सीनियर नाल दोस्ती दोस्ती कर करके।
And once that action trace was developed, we decided to run each of those problems 10 times through workflow conversion. So we ended up with 20 total workflows. Those 20 workflows were then tested with 3 different molecules. This was to ensure that the workflows were actually adaptable and scalable to be applicable to multiple roles.
I'm Christian, and I'm joined by my colleague Sarah. Today we're very excited to present our research on zirconia nanoparticles and their role in sustainable technologies and applications. So zirconium dioxide, or zirconia, is a remarkably versatile material because of its unique properties. It can withstand high temperatures, corrosion, and large amounts of mechanical stress. On top of that, it is also biocompatible, and it is an amazing conductor of oxide ions. This blending properties make zirconia a very valuable material in 3 main applications, namely biomedical, optical, and electrochemical applications that we will be talking about today.
Now coming to the knowledge gap and critical synthesis of structural property limitations. So why the need for this study? So we have our work on practically 3 main knowledge gaps, and the first one of them is the fragmented guidance on actually characterizing zirconia nanoparticles. There is a lack of consistent framework that links the synthesis techniques to structural property relationships. This makes it hard to generalize the best practices across applications, compare or have a benchmark performance. Now coming to research objectives. So our work as predictive control strategies for zirconia nanoparticles has 3 research objectives. Firstly, synthesis group optimization. We aim to fine-tune parameters such as phase composition, particle size, oxygen ratings, and surface chemistries. These variables are critical levels in technically defining properties of zirconia nanoparticles. Now coming to our second key objective of structural property correlation framework. We want to have a better framework that links the dopant chemistry, particle size, and surface modification directly with functional performance, enabling clear design goals. Further, we also want to have a predictive performance hypothesis. So we want to hypothesize before actually building the zirconia framework what the properties the zirconia nanoparticles will have, especially for different applications such as optical, electrochemical, and biomedical applications. Now coming to the synthesis landscape, so for any nanoparticle system, we have 3 main methods. The Soldier methods that offers precision. This technique offers control over composition and integrity and homogeneity, making it ideal for incorporating different dopants. It's widely used for achieving precise structural properties at the nanoscale. Then we have different hydrothermal methods. These are at moderate temperatures of about 200 to 400 degrees Celsius and yield highly crystalline products. Parameters like pH and surfactants play a key role in controlling particle size and morphology. The third and most important is green synthesis. This is the emerging method that is largely extract for environmentally benign processes. It should be scalable, sustainable, and aligned with the goal of reducing hazardous reagents and byproducts in the nanoparticle production.
Pure zirconia is not stable across all temperatures. At room temperature, zirconia exists in the monoclinic phase. As it gets heated up, we get the tetragonal phase of zirconia, and at the highest temperatures, we obtain cubic phase. Now, the tetragonal and cubic phases are the most useful as they maximize ionic mobility and optical clarity. However, they are not stable at room temperature, as cooling these high heat phases causes cracking into large volume changes. To prevent this, zirconia is stabilized with oxides, such as yttrium, calcium, or cerium. This locks in the cubic and tetragonal phases at room temperature without cracking. Now, a remarkable thing happens to the lattice when those dopants are out. Take yttrium as an example. Zirconium is normally tetragonal, meaning each zirconium ion has a +4 charge. On the other hand, yttrium is trigonal and has a +3 charge. So when yttrium replaces zirconium in the lattice, there is a missing positive charge that needs to be balanced. The crystal compensates by expelling an oxygen ion, creating what we call an oxygen vacancy. Now, these vacancies are not just useless events, rather they are crucial to zirconia's functionality. They enable oxygen ions to migrate through the lattice, which explains why stabilized zirconia shows much higher ionic conductivity. If you take a look at the bar chart on the left, doping zirconia provides about an order of magnitude higher ionic conductivity than pure zirconia alone by raising the temperature. Yttrium stabilized zirconia, or YSC, is one of the most important solid-state electrolytes used today. In solid oxide fuel cells, oxygen vacancies provide fast ion transport, enabling efficient energy conversion at high temperatures. In supercapacitors, these same vacancies can store charge and improve diffusion boosting performance. As shown in the figure, doping increases ionic conductivity by several orders of magnitude. This, combined with zirconia stability, makes it ideal for partial electrochemical environments. Now, these same oxygen vacancies have profound effects on how zirconia interacts with light, opening up applications for optics. Oxygen vacancies can also create electron traps. When electrons fall into them, they emit light, often in the UV range, which is useful for luminescent and optoelectronic devices. At the same time, dopants and grains can be tuned to adjust light scattering and transparency, which is especially important for applications such as dental ceramics where aesthetics take priority. Zirconia's high refractive index and durability make it ideal for anti-reflective coatings and optical layers. By tuning the vapor concentration, its phase composition can also be tuned to control light scattering, enhancing absorption in solar traveling layers for energy devices.
Now coming to the biomedical applications. So zirconia shows strong potential in the biomedical field, particularly in tissue engineering. On the left, we see that it improves both Young's modulus and compressive strength, so also enhances the mechanical reinforcement. Further, it is biocompatible, so it can be integrated with biological systems. They exhibit both antibacterial and antimicrobial properties, which can be vital in preventing infections in many plants. They also have bioactivity that promotes actile layer formation, supporting in biomineralization and tissue regeneration. These properties can be leveraged in bone tissue engineering, where zirconia is used in polymer ceramic nanocomposites. Cartilage tissue scaffolds, especially in hydrogen-based composites, help in reducing the swelling and improve mechanical performance. On the right is an illustrative example of what our team is currently working on, where we actually try to target bacterial cells with actually zirconium or metal oxide-based systems. The metal oxide-based systems actually penetrate the cell membrane and actually release ROS or reactive oxygen species, which actually kills the DNA of the bacteria and causes cell death. So it can be used as against antibiotic system as in a synergistic effect or as an alternative agent. Now coming to the meat of the project, where we have introduced a future work that is ongoing. So this is a CRISPR-Cas system with zirconium dioxide that has never been presented before in any individual. So the schematic outlines a nanoparticle delivery system based on CRISPR-Cas using zirconium nanoparticles encapsulated in lipid kinase. First, zirconium nanoparticles are structured with a tag peptide. It is a peptide that actually is used to penetrate the cell membrane, and then these are complexed with Cas9 proteins and plasmids encoding the GLK1 gene, forming the core payload. This entire complex is then encapsulated in a DSP-10 layer that produces stable lipid nanoparticles suitable for biological delivery. To improve transcription, we have also provided doping of a coated layer with PI-coated zirconium dioxide with FeFeO4 that is actually ferromagnetic and has a PFI layer. The magnetization actually helps in targeting the CRISPR-Cas9 to direct the particles into the PFM or the porcine fetal fibroblasts. This system was specifically designed to deliver the Cas9 protein. In parallel, the secondary delivery system is used to guide the GRN, which directs the Cas9 to desired DNA target site for payloads. That concludes the presentation, and this work is currently being is going to be published in coordination chemistry reviews, and our collaborators are working on making the gene editing part in the metabolite bicycle.
Thank you so much. Anyone, any questions?
This might be something I just missed, but could we go back to the slide where you showed like the property, like just the one before this? Yeah, this one. So like the role of like zirconia, right? That's on the left in the boxes you have, right? Those are like the properties you guys have observed this material has, right? And the right are the applications, I'm guessing, as an outcome of these properties. So you guys have like the bone tissue and the cartilage tissue, right? So is this meant to function as like implants or like new like engineered materials like for cartilage, right?
Yes, so
Is this meant to be like
zirconium are used for dental implants already, and they are suitable for biocompatible layers. So for tissue regeneration techniques, they are also being like tested for different hemocompatibility and biocompatibility. So it has not been it has only been used for dental implants currently in humans. So no other material has been made for any human-based products for any like implants, other than dental implants.
Thanks, Rick.
अलग अलग फील्ड्स दी ਹੁੰਦੀ ਪਈ ਹੈ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਪਹਾੜੀ ਹੈ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿੱਤਰ ਦੀ ਕੈਮੀਕਲ ਦੀ ਸੁਣ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਹਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਐਰੋਸਪੇਸ ਦੀ ਸੁਣਾਂਗੇ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕੀ ਬਣਦਾ ਹੈ ਗੁੱਡ
That meant that devices powered by smaller chips or smaller hardware, like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, were left underexplored. So devices like Meta's VR first started working and it wasn't crashing. This is what the scene looked like. It was glitchy. There's a lot of artifacts. It was mostly black. Not what you want. You can't make out that this is supposed to be, I think, like a hallway in a house. So clearly we had a lot of work to do. And what we realized is that a single Gaussian was rendering fine. But when we had multiple Gaussians overlapping, we started getting this artifact, these artifacts and this glitching. This led us.
ਮੁੰਡੇ ਪੋਸਟਰ ਲੱਗੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ ਪ੍ਰੈਜੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਦੇਖੋ ਰੈਟ ਰੇਸ ਦੇਖੋ ਭਾਈ ਲੱਗੇ ਪਏ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਦੋ ਟਾਈਪ ਦੇ ਅਵਾਰਡ ਇੱਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਟ ਕਰੇਗਾ ਇੱਕ ਪੀਪਲਸ ਚੋਇਸ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਵੋਟ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਚੂਜ਼ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਵਧੀਆ ਕੀਤਾ
But so clearly, I've shown that lithium.
Hi everyone, my name is Jim. I am a undergraduate summer research student at UNERD. And the project for a summer that I'll be sharing with you today, my journey throughout, is replacing PFAS coatings on PEEK with EMS brushes, specifically for oil repellents. And so I just want you to take a note of these two keywords, PFAS coatings, replacing them, and oil repellents. So before I get started with my journey and how I did that, right, you need to understand why I did it in the first place, right? And so the reason why I did it is because PFAS coatings are toxic. Perfluoroalkyl substances, also known as PFAS, are carcinogenic, bioaccumulate in the human body, and are harmful to the environment. However, currently they're being used because they're highly oil repellent, as well as other liquids. However, there is a new candidate to replace this, and this alternative is called polydimethylsiloxane, also known as PMS. I'll be referring to it that way for the rest of the presentation. So you can see the structure here, and it's a silicone-based polymer, which gives it some characteristics that are helpful to its repellency. One of which is that it's very flexible, and although I won't be talking much about that, that's just something to know. And when they're formed in brush coatings, they only coatings so repel most liquids, and they have high droplet ability. So what that means is when droplets are deposited onto a brush coating made from PMS, the droplet is easy to move. So that's a highly desirable characteristic of this coating. However, it's very limited in its oil repellency, which is why I was trying to improve that for my research this summer. So, oil repellency, why is it important? Well, it's important for fabrics. If you take I direct your attention to the figures on the left, what this proves is that when water repellent coatings or coated fabrics are soaked in oil or wetted by oils, they reduce in their hydrophobicity as well. So you can take a look at the figure. before and after submerging in oil, the water contact angle, which quantifies the repellency, is reduced. As well as the figure below showing how that's also reduced. You can imagine when a droplet sits on a surface, if it's highly repelled, it will beat up nicely into a ball. That's quite intuitive. But if not, it will flatten out and wet the surface. So oil repellency is something that passively maintains water repellency on fabrics. And the reason why that's important, especially for fabrics, is if you can imagine for clothes, sweat is the main source of oils for fabrics when on clothing. And you can imagine for a day like today when it's raining out, people are wearing rain jackets or like they're rushing to work and they sweat a lot, then their hydrophobic quote-unquote jackets will start to get wet and they'll be wet inside when it's not supposed to. So that's why oil repellency is important because it passively maintains hydrophobicism. So, like I mentioned earlier, contact angle, or specifically advancing contact angle, is something that quantifies repellency. So, if you direct your attention to the figure, advancing angle is defined as the angle between the interface of the droplet and air, as well as it's measured from the substrate, and when the oil or liquid is advancing or being added to the substrate. So, when it's moving out, essentially. And receding is the opposite. I'm going to focus on advancing, and I'm going to call that ACA, and it's going to be my measure of performance throughout the journey. In order for a liquid to wet the surface, it must first advance. So if you can take a look at the two fabrics that are shown on the right, and one is something that's uncoated, and one is something that's coated, the liquid without coated, right? So you can see with the uncoated one that it gets wet when a droplet is like deposited on, and the angle is 0, right? But for coated fabric, it's extremely high, like 120 degrees. And so this is especially important because it shows that, well, yeah, we want the substrates to not get wet when it's coated to the surface, but it's especially important for porous substrates like fabrics because it can get wet, and on top of that, the liquid can actually go through the substrate. But you need to know what I was trying to do, and in order to improve repellency, oil repellency, like I said before, I was motivated by a paper that was published, basically telling me that increasing the molecular weight of PMS oil grafted onto the surface is something that increases the advancing contact. And I'll show you the method for how to do that. So PMS proteins, they were created on silicon wafers. Silicon wafers because they're homogeneous and have a very smooth structure. So I take a bare silicon wafer, put it in the oxygen plasma chamber, which creates these reactive silyl or SiOH sites. And then on top of that, I will add the PMS oil of high molecular weight, and then heat that in the oven at whatever temperature, typically around 50 to 107 degrees. And then after that, once the brushes are grafted onto the surface, there's going to be some excess oil. I clean up with solvents, some polar and non-polar solvents that are arbitrary. And then I will have this grafted PMS brush coating that's thick and desirable. So, and the thickness and contact angle is they were measured using the goniometer and ellipsometry. So, something interesting. An advancing angle of 75 degrees was reached with my coatings. So I created a coating around 30 to 35 nanometers thick. That's very big for a PMS coating, with using a 20 million centisterling PMS coating. So centisterling is a measure of viscosity. The reason why I'm using viscosity is because molecular weight is something that we want to increase, but that's hard to measure when it gets super high, but viscosity isn't. So I typically use viscosity to measure how heavy something is, like oil. And this was created at, like I said, 50 to 110 degrees. And the reason why this is interesting and exciting is because the advancing contact angle, which you said is a quantifiable measure of oil repellency, right? Is comparable to that of PFAS, which is something that we're trying to move away from because it's toxic, right? However, there are some downsides, and if you can see from the video, when I'm advancing the liquid, you can see it drops quite a bit, which decreases, the credibility of some of the measures that I have and increases the error. But aside from that, it's still pretty exciting. So another thing that I found out was that thickness is related to advancing contact angle as well, not just the molecular weight. You can see from this plot that there's a positive correlation between the thickness of the coating that grade as well as the advancing contact contact angle. This is for 20 million centisterling PM source again, and you can see that positive correlation. However, you can see the data points highlighted in red, and those are samples that I accidentally dropped in the lab and they weren't contaminated. So because of that, I cleaned it very thoroughly with the solvents that I used, but on top of that, I cleaned it very thoroughly with these Kimtech wipes, which I was using, but I wasn't being very thorough with them. I was being gentle with them, but these contaminated ones, because I wanted to clean off all the contaminants, I was super thorough, right? After that, I saw a huge decrease in the thickness, right? But then the advancing angle also decreased, which helped to my hypothesis that thickness is related to the advancing contact angle, but we can't have that because we want some consistent results, right? So I stopped using Kimtech wipes completely, and instead of using those to clean my samples with solvents, I just used purely solvents and just submerged them. So, and then after that, once I started doing that, something interesting happened. What I found was that thickness was actually not related to the advancing contact angle. So you can see this plot. This is the time in the x-axis. Time is curing time in the oven, as well as the thickness plotted on the left and the advancing contact angle on the right, those are the axes. You can see that thickness in blue increases with curing time to a certain degree, but plateaus at a time that's typically found around 12 to 15 hours. However, you can see that advancing contact angle remains constant, generally around 75 degrees like I mentioned. And so this got me thinking, if thickness doesn't relate to advancing contact angle, which is our measure of performance, then what does? Does the temperature affect the curing temperature? And so I checked that. Temperature also doesn't affect advancing contact angle. So this time I was using 2 million as well as 20 million centistones moles, and they were graphed at varying curing temperatures. So similar plot, but temperature on the x-axis, contact angle and thickness are independent variables here. You can see that the blue line, which is the thickness, right, for the bottom one, that's the 2 million one. So you can clearly see that there's an increase in thickness with curing temperature. However, for both the 2 million and 20 million, it was very constant with advanced contact. So then what is related? What could be related is chain length. Chain length of what's grafted onto the surface. So we did an AFM measurement, which is atomic force microscopy. So that was used to find the actual chain length of the grafted chain. It's slightly different to the lentimeter. And so what we found was that the grafted chain length is independent of the curing time or temperature. So that could be potentially what's related to the advancing contact angle or performance. So understanding some of the mechanics there, that was what we did. So some takeaways from my time at Dream Lab. Takeaways. Thank you.
Any question? Rick?
Great talk. I kind of had a question about the next steps, I guess, which we're actually going to get to. But so what you kind of did over the summer was you tested out also fabrication technique in these programs, right? That would give you the performance you desire. And to some extent, you have some hypotheses about what models is giving you this performance, right? But in the beginning, you said the ultimate objective for this is to be going for fabrics, right? So how do you know that the results and methods that you used will ultimately translate to fabrics?
Right. So that's an excellent question. So from what I understood, you were saying I tested my EMS coatings on silicon wafers because they're homogeneous. But we're trying to move eventually. The ultimate goal is to replace PFAS coatings on fabrics, right? Which are nowhere near the same substrate as a smooth silicon wafer, right? So how will it translate? The answer to that question is we don't know actually. So that would be something that we can test right there, test on fabrics. But the reason why it gives us confidence that it will potentially help is because, like I said, advancing contact angle is a good measure for performance. However, yeah, on smooth substrates like silicon wafers, advancing contact angles are typically a lot lower than those of textured surfaces like fabrics, right? But that, again, gives us even more, despite the differences, that gives us more confidence because, well, advancing contact angles can be even higher on fabrics, right? And so that gives us that confidence in a way, but obviously it hasn't been tested.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Reza?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm just wondering,
Right. So XPS wasn't done. The reason for that is because we know the chemical content of PMS very well. It's quite, it's actually very stable as a compound, and it's thermally stable. It's not harmful for the human body at all. And so the specific PMS that I use, because PMS is widely used in other applications as well. They're used in gel forms and other forms as well. The specific one that I used was a methyl-terminated PMS, which means it's actually pure PMS. So I knew exactly the chemical content, so XPS wasn't done. But what we could do is some kind of atomic force microscopy measurements, because these are very preliminary measurements, the ones that are reported. They can be repeated again to test how homogeneous my coding is. So that's one thing that I could do in terms of the chemical structure and verify that. That answers your question. Okay.
Well, that is a comment. Like, not but like, how does that unroll? I do see that the slides are like the way that Kevin would have proved details and stuff. Yeah. Well, like for more general audience,
Right.
I would start with for example, with science field 4 rather than all the jargon to make it easier to understand for general audience.
Yep.
Yeah, this one or the next one maybe the animation. These would be better starting points, right? Instead of like material and stuff. But yeah, very good. I really like that. He judges you, Kevin judges him. So yeah. Thank you. Anything else? Thank you so much.
अंदर थल्ले पहुँच जाता माटी में बंदे ने इन्हों दी ब्रैडा ब्रुडा पचदियां नहीं आप टिफन ते रिलाई करीदा लेकिन टिफन चो भी आई है किनोवा करके बट वो तो बेटर है यही खा रहे हैं अपने जजेस के रूम च जिथे मौका मिलता है मिल जाने बह जाने तैयारी हो रही है प्रेजेंटेशन माड़ी मोटी एडिट कर ली है नोट्स बना लिए तो वधिया पग सोनी आई है फोटो खिंच लिया इसका राउंड टेबल होंगे सारे आगे ज्ञान बढ़ते कि जो करना चाहिए रिसर्च बारे लंच ऑलमोस्ट खत्म हो गया टॉफी
Light, right? Yes. And I just shine it on it. Like you might have to cup it in your hands a little to see it properly, but and then
come around from the side.
and then if you like do you see how it's like do you see the glow?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's pretty cool, right?
So what's the practical application of that?
Anti-counterfeiting and bioimaging. Specifically, I really want to test bioimaging because I think it has a lot of potential because the laser can penetrate through tissue like pretty well. So that's like really.
You know that guy was the BME prof, right? That is why he was asking about the bioimaging.
Oh, is he actually?
Yeah.
Wow. I thought he was gonna ask me about if it's like biocompatible or something, which it is. It is biocompatible. Yeah.
He looked pretty impressed. He might take you in to ask him like for next year.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I
he's
hope
that
so.
kind of a guy.
Okay, cool. I hope so. He seems so chill.
Yeah. सारे पोस्टर ने सारे मुंडे रीडिंग ने प्रेजेंटेशन तो पहले पोस्टर कर लेंदे ने बन गई भाई का सेटअप ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਆਏ ਹਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਰੇ ਟੀਵੀ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਰਿਕਾਰਡ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਂ ਫੋਟੋ ਦੇਖੀ ਸੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਉਹ ਪਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਿਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਗ੍ਰੇਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੇਖ ਲਾਂਗੇ ਹੁਣੇ ਦੇਖੀ ਜਾਏਗੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਡੈਮੋ ਮਾਰ ਕੇ ਦੇਖ ਲਿਆ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਸਹੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਤੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਹਿਸਾਬ जोग मारेंगे हिसाब दी जज बाहर ही खड़ी है आप पहले पहुंचे हुए कमरे च हमेशा पहले पहुंची का होंगे आई हिसाब है मित्रों का दस दोस्त कर लो फिर खिच दिए कम सोना जल्दी प्रेजेंटेशन चलती भी है उत्थे
My question for you is you mentioned that aluminum was not necessarily the most, if you could just go to that slide again.
Yes, this one.
Yeah, you said that there were several different constraints when you with aluminum. Did you look into any other materials that you might propose moving forward?
Great question, because this was actually the first conversation I had with my grad student, that hey, okay, you can design this motor model, how are we going to manufacture So there are 3D printing options, there are machining options, and even in those two kind of branches, there are different materials you can use. So, like I said, the main thing that we were focused on was this thermal performance, right? We needed to ensure, because like, if say the testing is happening at a state where it's like 35 degrees Celsius instead of 37 degrees Celsius, even if we get good data, that kind of invalidates our whole result, right? Because we're modeling human body, and that's a very like critical device, or critical system. So we ended up going with aluminum because we were like, okay, it can conduct well, and we don't know like what kind of forces there are going to be, so it will definitely be strong enough, and it's easy to machine. Like we can get away with it. Like there's the same signal at our lab that is able to machine aluminum as opposed to something else like the stainless steel. But turns out actually, like this organ-on-chip work that my lab does, we actually use acrylic white light, PMMA specifically. So that was something we did consider. So PMMA, why we would want to use that is optically transparent. So I can actually mill out this exact design with PMMA as well. And it would be optically transparent with small position that I said. But the issue with it is it would have the thermal warp. So technically, PMMA shouldn't warp at 37 degrees Celsius, right? But the heater that's in that slot isn't at 37 degrees Celsius. It's actually a lot taller. Once it like kind of transfers through that space, it becomes 37. But when the heater initially turns on, it's actually quite low. So there might be warping issues which might affect the other objective that I had, which was, sorry again, but supporting uniaxial compression. So if the system warps halfway through the test, or as you're doing the test for months on end or whatever, right, then you can't really predict the kind of compression you're going to do. So what we're kind of thinking now, which is like a possible idea, is maybe like this is like very much me brainstorming right in front of you, right? But let me just go back to this slide. Yeah, so kind of having a mix of both. So we want the acrylic for its optical transparency. We want the aluminum for its conduction ability. So what if we could kind of do a half and half design? The production part of it is still aluminum. The top bit where the water bot sits is something made of acrylic, so we could image. Now that has a host of other challenges as well, which obviously I wasn't able to get to this summer, but it would be great to explore in the future.
Bringing out piped water systems all throughout sub-Saharan Africa, and whether this water is being
Components are the nodes. So usually these nodes, which are the circles here, and it's typically done
How was everyone's day today? Despite bumps in the road and just being all over the place today. Okay, now into the actual awards. Let's begin with the computer and data science, which is spelled wrong, and mathematics section. Okay, and for this section, I believe for best poster, there was no runner-up, but we have 2 ties for first place, and those go to Ella and Grace. And the runner-up for best podium for this section is Lynn. And best podium for comp sci and data science and mathematics goes to Jati. continue on to biomedical engineering. The runner-up for best poster for biomedical engineering is Selena. Best poster for biomedical engineering goes to Emma. The runner-up for best podium for biomedical goes to Ellie Monroe. And best podium for biomedical engineering goes to Oscar. We will now continue slowly into environmental engineering and sustainability. The runner-up for best poster, if we have one, is Christina Simpson. And best poster for environmental sustainability goes to Andrew Lee. The runner-up for best podium for environmental sustainability goes to Amanda. And best podium for environmental sustainability goes to Jerry John. Moving on to chemical engineering and material science engineering. Full awards to present here. So we have the People's Choice Awards, Best Abstract, and last but not least, Top Researcher. So, without further ado, Best Abstract goes to the People's Choice Award for the podium presentations go to Nicole and Joe. And the People's Choice Award for Best Poster goes to Anushka and Alina. Overall top researcher, can I get a drum roll, please? Next year goes to Tia Patel. And that concludes UNERD 2025.
ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਦਾ ਰੌਲਾ ਰੂਲਾ ਦੇਖ ਲਓ ਰੌਲਾ ਰੱਪਾ ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਤਿਆਰ ਹੋਣੀ ਦੀ ਹੋਣੀ ਆ ਪ੍ਰੈਜੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੋਹਣੇ ਸੋਹਣੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਮੁੰਡੇ ਨੇ ਤਿਆਰ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਪਏ ਨੇ ਮਜ਼ਾ ਆ ਜਾਊਗਾ ਏਅਰ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਦੀ ਐਂਟਰੈਂਸ ਹੈ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਰਾ ਪੁੱਛਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਕੋਪ ਦੇ ਫਾਇਦੇ ਕੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ ਵਰਨਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਛੱਡ ਦੇਣੀ ਹੈ ਐਵੇਂ ਕੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਕੁਛ ਕੀਤੇ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਇੰਸਪੀਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਲਰਨਿੰਗ वगैरह भी होंगे हैं बच्चे अपने इंटरव्यू दे सकते हैं इन्हों बुक करके आ सारा करियर लिए है जो तुम काम ही करना है पढ़ाई पढ़ाई नहीं करनी मतलब पढ़ाई ही करनी है काम नहीं करना एक तो पुट्ठा बोल देता आप तो जरूर कोप ना करो कोई जरूरत नहीं हैगी तो बाकी कहते इन्नी वड्डी यूनिवर्सिटी है जे हुण भी नौकरी लगेगी तो लाना तो इहो जी नौकरी तो हुण जेड़े बंदे पढ़ाई अच्छा कर रहे उन्होंने नहीं लगेगी तो बाकी उहदी लगेगी कोई टेंशन वाली गल नहीं है सारे वर्ड्स के मामले ਸਾਰੇ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਫਸਟ ਈਅਰ ਜਿੱਤੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਇੰਜੀਨੀਅਰਿੰਗ ਸਾਇੰਸ ਵਾਲੇ ਪਿਛਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਇਹ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਸਾਲ ਜਦ ਆਪਾਂ ਫਸਟ ਈਅਰ ਸੀਗੇ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਜਿੱਤੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਫਸਟ ਈਅਰ ਵਾਲੇ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਹੁਣੇ ਵੀ ਉਹੀ ਹੈ ਆਪਣਾ ਜੁਨਸੀਓ ਬਾਈ ਨੂੰ ਪੂਰਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੋਰੀਆ ਜਾਣ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਕੁਝ ਜਿੱਤ ਕੇ ਜਾਈਏ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਐਬਸਟਰੈਕਟ ਦਾ ਜਿੱਤ ਲਿਆ ਐਬਸਟਰੈਕਟ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਰਿਟਰਨ 'ਚ ਦੇਣਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਅਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਯਾਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫਸਟ ਈਅਰ ਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਆ ਨਾ, ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਇੰਜੀਨੀਅਰਿੰਗ ਸਾਇੰਸ ਤਾਂ ਚਲੋ ਜਿੱਤੂਗੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਹਾਈ ਸਾਇੰਸ ਪੜ੍ਹੇ, ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਉਹ ਬੜਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਜ਼ਬਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੁਛ ਤਕੜਾ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ। ਬਹੁਤ ਜਾਨ ਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਿਛਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਜਿੱਤੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਬਟ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਿੱਤੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਬਾਅਦ 'ਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਉਹ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਮਜ਼ੋਰ ਦੇ ਮਚੋਰ ਦੇ, ਅਤੇ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਬਣਾਉਣ 'ਚ ਇੰਨਾ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿ ਮਤਲਬ ਕੰਮ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੈਜੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨਾਂ ਬਣਾਉਣ 'ਚ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਨਹੀਂ ਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ। ਛੱਡ ਪ੍ਰੈਜੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਵਧੀਆ ਗਈ ਸੀ, ਬੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਯਾਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੜਾ ਵਧੀਆ ਬਣ ਕੇ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ, ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਸਹੀ ਹੈ, ਬਟ ਉਹੀ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਯਾਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆ ਜੋ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਵੇਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਕੀਤਾ, ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਚਲੋ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੰਸਟਰੂਮੈਂਟ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਚਲਾ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਰਿਲੇਟਡ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਬੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੀਤਾ, ਬਟ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਚਲੋ ਟੈਕਨੀਕਲ ਆਨਸਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਬਟ ਪਰਸਨਲੀ ਦੱਸ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਤੋਂ ਤੂੰ ਕੀ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ, ਕਿ ਡਰਾਮਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਹਾਂ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਮੈਜਰਮੈਂਟ ਆ ਗਈ ਤੂੰ ਲੱਭ ਲਈ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਪਰ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਸੋਚੋ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਤੋਂ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਕੀ ਹੈ, ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਚਲਾਉਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਇੰਸਟਰੂਮੈਂਟ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਹੈ ਜੀ, ਐਕਸਪੋਜਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਗ੍ਰੈਜੂਏਟ ਵਾਲੇ ਦਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਕੰਮ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਾਨਫਰੰਸਾਂ ਅਟੈਂਡ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ, ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਲੱਗ-ਅਲੱਗ ਕੰਜ਼ੋਰਟੀਅਮ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਗਰੁੱਪਸ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕ ਐਂਟਰੀ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ, ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਜੀ, ਅਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੰਸਟਰੂਮੈਂਟ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਉਹ ਅਲੱਗ-ਅਲੱਗ ਟਾਈਪ ਦੀ ਫਾਈਲਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਊਟਪੁੱਟ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ, HDF ਹੋ ਗਈ ਜੋ ਵੀ, ਅਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਹੈ। ਅਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਸਮਝਣ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਰਿਸਰਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ, ਇੱਥੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਦੱਸਣੀ ਆਪਣੀ, ਬਾਕੀ ਸਭ ਵਧੀਆ। ਅਤੇ ਆ ਗੱਲ ਸੀਗੀ ਕਾਲਜ ਪਾਰਕ, उसके बाद थोड़ा कुछ मिठा हो जाए, फलरियाँ हो जाए थोड़ी जियाँ, आइसक्रीम लवांगे इतों आ रहा सारा पैन बूंदा भी वध गया वध गया स्ट्रॉबेरी चीज़ केक वाली जसवंत सिंह नारंग जाते पे आ देखो ट्रैफिक ट्रूफिक रोकया पे इन्होंने एक ट्रक बैक करने के पिछे अपने होंगे ट्रैफिक नहीं निकल रहा, ट्रक भी निकल रहा, सब कुछ निकलिया रहा। कितने बंदे रखे ट्रक बैक कर फेवरेट शॉट अपना